I started off as a Spanish teacher. I started teaching Spanish when I was 19, in fact, and had 3 or 4 happy years as a Spanish teacher. And one day, a principal called me into his office, and this was in 1958. And he said, "I'd like you to be a counselor next fall." By this time, the National Defense Education Act had happened, and schools had to have 1 counselor for every 300 students. I said, but I don't have any training. And he said, "Wow, you'll do fine. Kids seem to like you. But start going to school this summer to get a degree in counseling." And so I did. And shortly after that, the director of guidance resigned, and principal number 2 in my life called me in and said, "I'd like to have your application on my desk tomorrow morning for being director of guidance."
You were how old, JoAnn? You were how old at the time at that point?
By that time, I must have been, I don't know, late 20s, almost 30, I guess. And that came as an unexpected surprise. And so anyway, with that, I became director of guidance of a large school, 3,300 students, 12 full-time counselors, a psychologist. And we started using the Kuder preference record.
All right.
As our interest inventory at that point. You know, as I look back on that, I really laugh because we had a half-hour interview with every student. The counselor had a half-hour interview with every student once in the 4 years that the student was there for the purpose of career planning. And
30 minutes every 4 years.
That's right. We interpreted the Kuder preference record and talked about what are your plans, and, you know, if we got it all settled in a half hour.
That's it. You're magicians.
But long about this time, of course, I knew Holland's theory, and I had taken his self-directed search, and my personal code is ISE, which means the I means I like to think about new ways to do things, and the S means I like to help people. So I think it was my IS combination that kept saying, you know, there just must be a better way to reach more students with this kind of assistance. Simultaneously, IBM released a cathode ray tube. And for the first time, you know, we could have a computer in one place, and we could have people as far as 1,000 feet away, a whole 1,000 feet away.
Amazing.
Interacting from a cathode ray tube with the data going down a cable. And in 1966, got quite a lot of funding from the Illinois State Board of Vocational Education to develop one of the first computer-delivered career guidance systems. And so that got me started. That system was called CIVIS, the Computerized Vocational Information System. We used it in our own high school in 1966, 1967, and by 1968 it was distributed. We let schools pay $200 for getting a big computer tape, and then they could run this system in their own schools. And we did put in the scores of all the students for the Kuder preference record.
You entered those in?
We entered those in, and that got the attention of IBM. So IBM came along and said, if you would write a proposal to get some more money, we could do a more advanced system. And what they meant was using their new touch screen, and what I meant was a system with improved content. And so that was the basis for writing proposals again, this time for a new system that we called Discover. That caught the attention of ACT.
ACT.
So in 1982, ACT came along, and they simply invited me to go to Iowa and make a presentation about this wondrous work, because my high school had become a demonstration center to show the use of the computer with career guidance. ACT invited me and my small staff, I had a staff of about 6 or 7 at that time, to merge into ACT. And that happened in 1982 because on the personal side, my husband Stan and I were only children. We had both mothers living with us. It wasn't the time for me to move from Maryland to Iowa. So ACT was good to let me establish an office north of Baltimore and to stay in Maryland. And that office became the ACT Educational Technology Center. It's still there with about 40 employees and develops ACT's software. But also had wonderful opportunities after leaving ACT. Worked for a company in Japan called Nippon Manpower. They needed a curriculum to train what they call career development advisors. I had, with others, written the curriculum for the United States for training career development facilitators. And so between 1998 and 2003 or so, besides working with Kuder, I also worked to do this curriculum for Japan.
We came along and said,
invited me to go back to work again.
We need you full time.
That's right.
That's what we needed.
In 2005. I think.
Was that what it was in 2005?
Yeah.
And became executive vice president and head of development for Kuder and everything.
In January, yeah,
and
that year.
Everything we've had since that point and even before that. If we think about the development of Kuder, where we really, all we had done was we said, at the advent of really the internet, we didn't know what that was, but we knew there was a better way to be able to move from the old pin punch of the Kuder and then the hand scored.
One of those.
Yeah, I do too. I've got them in there. So then that's when we made the decision to bring you on board to say, how do we create a really comprehensive system? We need to be much more than just assessment.